This is the full Moxie, a steel single pivot full suspension bike from Pipedream Cycles. I've had this bike for about 3 months now, so I figured it was about time to do a bike check and a mini review. The frame comes in 2 different sizes, long and longer. I have the longer size, which comes with a 510mm reach, a 64-degree head tube angle, and a 77.5-degree seat tube angle. I have it set up with 146mm of travel in the rear and 150 up front. There were a couple of criteria I had in mind when I was picking a frame. First, I wanted it to be steel. I've owned a couple of steel hardtails in the past, and they have been by far my favorite bikes. There is a slightly different ride quality compared to alloy or carbon frames, but I mostly wanted steel because I'm vain and I really like the look of the skinny steel tubing. I also wanted a suspension design that was reliable and easy to service. The full Moxie has a yoke-driven single pivot design with only 2 sets of bearings to replace. It also has a slightly progressive leverage curve, which allows me to run a coil shock, which has longer service intervals than an air shock. I wanted a frame with a minimum amount of bottom bracket drop as well. The full Moxie has 20mm of drop, which seems conservative when compared with other bikes in this travel range. Let's go over parts. Up front, I have a DT Swiss F535 One fork with 150mm of travel. It's okay. Despite my best efforts to fiddle with the settings, I just can't get the first portion of the travel to feel comfortable. There's a lot of stiction compared to other forks that I've used, so it's not very comfortable over the small chatter. When the terrain gets rough and fast, the DT offers plenty of support, so I haven't bothered to change it out with a different fork. My rear shock is a DVO Jade X coil. I switch between that and a RockShox Super Deluxe Air shock. I love the coil for the traction and the comfort that it offers, along with the longer service intervals, but it tends to get hung up in the slower, chunky sections of trail. I enjoy the air shock for the support it gives for technical climbs, and I like how easy it is to tune the spring rate and the progressiveness of the shock, but it doesn't have quite the same sensitivity as the coil, and I don't have a very good history with reliability of air shocks. Right now, I think I partly prefer the feel of the air shock, but I need to experiment with a higher spring rate coil. I'm using a Microshift Advent 9-speed drivetrain with an 11 to 42 tooth cassette. I have a MTX Eagle crankset with a 30-tooth chainring. I love this setup. You could replace this entire drivetrain for less than the price of a GX cassette. I'd say you get 90% of the shifting performance of a GX or XT setup for a quarter of the price. I don't miss the extra cogs of a 12-speed setup. The cassette provides plenty of range, and 9-speed is much less fiddly to set up than 12-speed. Microshift derailleurs have an adjustable clutch that is super easy to access and service. If I break a cassette tooth or smash my derailleur, who cares? I can just buy another one with plenty of cash to spare. My front wheel is a Canfield Special Blend with a Spank hex hub, which is left over from my Nimble 9 hardtail. My rear wheel is a Nukeproof Horizon, which I got after I destroyed the Canfield rear wheel. I have a 2.6-inch WTB Vigilante tough and fast in the front, and a 2.4-inch E13 all-terrain in the rear. The peace of mind of dual-ply tires is definitely worth the extra pound. I haven't had a single flat since I started using them. For brakes, I'm using SRAM Code RSCs with 200mm Centerline rotors front and rear. I prefer the feel of Shimano brakes, but the codes have been alright, especially after I upgraded the pads to MTX Gold. They provide a little more bite and power than the stock metallic pads. The full Moxie has a pretty low stack, so I have Spank Spoon bars with 60mm of rise, mated to a short 33mm Spank Spoon stem. There's a wolf tooth headset with matching seat post collar, Nukeproof grips, a ZTTO dropper lever, and 1-up composite pedals. My dropper is a 185mm bike yoke Divine. I haven't done a bit of service on it in 2 years, and it still works flawlessly. My seat is a specialized bridge chromoly, which I find fits my rear end really comfortably. The full Moxie doesn't have a water bottle mount in the main triangle, and I didn't want a bottle cage sticking out of the bottom, so I have a Fidlock water bottle. It attaches magnetically, and you just twist the bottle to remove it. It hasn't come off once accidentally, so I have no complaints so far. I have these Convert Air doohickeys installed on my tubeless valves. You remove the Presta core and screw these on so it has a proper Schrader valve on it. I hate Presta with a passion, so these are a must for me. There's a little Velcro chainstay protector left over from my Ragley Big Al hardtail. On the trail, the bike is incredible. It's easily the most capable bike I've ever ridden. It's stable through the chunk, yet nimble in the turns. I feel like this bike has opened up a huge amount of progression for me. I'm faster both up and down, and I've hit features I wouldn't have dreamed of doing a year ago. If I had to change anything about this bike, I'd make a new size in between long and longer. I'd say this bike is about 20 millimeters too long for me. I can feel it in the slow, techie moves. It's also heavy, but that's more from my part selection. It's 37 pounds, but the steel frame is only 1 pound heavier than a comparable alloy frame. I've really enjoyed this bike so far, and I hope you enjoyed checking it out with me today.